The global village. When the world was supposed to feel smaller and friendlier. The prediction, what we thought. As the internet spread in the 1990s, one of the most hopeful ideas attached to it was that it would turn the world into a global village. Distance would matter less. Cultural barriers would soften. People from different countries, backgrounds, and belief systems would interact directly, bypassing governments, broadcasters, and gatekeepers. Exposure would breed understanding. Connection would reduce conflict. The sheer act of communicating across borders would make the world more tolerant, more cooperative, and more humane. This was not framed as a naive dream. It was framed as a structural outcome. Once everyone could talk to everyone else, the logic went. Parochialism would lose its grip. Misunderstandings would be corrected by proximity. Shared problems would feel shared. Standing in 1999, this idea felt not just plausible, but morally uplifting. The internet wasn't merely a tool, it was a social force that would knit humanity closer together. Why this prediction made sense in 1999? To understand the appeal of the global village, it helps to remember how mediated and distant the world still felt at the end of the 20th century. In 1999, international communication was expensive and deliberate. Most people's exposure to other cultures came through television, books, or travel. News about other countries was filtered through a small number of institutions. Direct contact with strangers abroad was rare. The early internet disrupted this instantly. Email allowed direct personal communication across continents. Chat rooms and forums brought together people who would never have met otherwise. Early websites exposed users to voices, ideas, and perspectives outside their local environment. Even limited connectivity created a sense of proximity that had previously required travel. From that vantage point, it was easy to believe the internet would erode boundaries simply by making other people visible. This belief also fit neatly with the emotional climate of the time. The Cold War had ended. Globalization was accelerating. International trade and travel were expanding. There was a widespread sense that humanity was moving toward greater integration and cooperation. The millennium amplified this feeling. The turn of the year 2000 was treated as a shared human milestone. Fireworks lit up cities across the globe in sequence. News broadcasts stitched together celebrations from dozens of countries. For a brief moment, the world really did feel synchronized. The internet appeared to be the infrastructure that would make that synchronization permanent. Who said it, and where? One of the most influential proponents of this vision was Nicholas Negroponte, whose 1995 book, Being Digital, helped popularize the idea that digital networks would collapse distance and reshape social relations. Negroponte argued that as the world moved from atoms to bits, geography would lose its power. Digital communication would enable new forms of community based on interest rather than location. People would interact more freely, more frequently, and more informally across national boundaries. His tone was optimistic, but not careless. He believed technology would enable connection, not force harmony. Still, the implication was clear. Once people could see and talk to one another directly, the world would feel smaller, and conflicts rooted in ignorance would diminish. By the late 1990s, this framing had become mainstream. The phrase global village circulated widely in media and policy discussions. It captured a hope that technology would do what politics often fail to: bring people closer together. What actually happened 2000 to 2025? The internet did make the world smaller, but not always friendlier. On a basic level, the prediction came true. People now communicate across borders effortlessly. International friendships, collaborations, and communities are commonplace. News, culture, and trends move globally in real time. A teenager in one country can follow creators, musicians, or activists from another without intermediaries. The sense of proximity is real. At the same time, the internet did not dissolve cultural or political differences. In many cases, it intensified them. As platforms scaled, interactions became mediated by algorithms rather than curiosity. People clustered into communities that reinforced existing beliefs. Exposure did not always produce understanding, it often produced friction. Cultural misunderstandings multiplied. Conflicts that once remained local now played out globally and publicly. The global village turned out to be less like a small town and more like a dense metropolis, full of encounters but not necessarily cohesion. By the 2010s and 2020s, The idea that connectivity would naturally produce harmony had lost credibility. The same networks that enabled cross-cultural dialogue also enabled harassment, radicalization, and coordinated misinformation. The village was connected, but fragmented. And yet, it would be inaccurate to say the prediction failed. The world is undeniably more interconnected. Cultural exchange happens constantly. Global awareness has increased. Movements, ideas, and crises now unfold on a planetary stage. The debate lies not in whether the village exists, but in what kind of village it became. Verdict. Status. Realized, debated. The internet did create a global village in terms of connectivity and proximity. People across the world now interact directly and continuously in ways unimaginable in 1999. What remains debated is the outcome. Connection did not automatically produce empathy or unity. The village exists, but it is noisy, divided, and often contentious. The prediction was structurally correct, but socially incomplete. Why it played out this way? The core assumption behind the global village idea was that exposure leads to understanding. In practice, exposure without shared norms, trust, or context often produces the opposite effect. When differences are encountered constantly and publicly, they can harden rather than soften. The internet lowered the cost of interaction, but it did not raise the quality of discourse. There was also an underestimation of scale. Small communities can resolve conflict through familiarity. Massive global networks cannot. When billions of people interact through the same platforms, friction is inevitable. Finally, incentives mattered. Platforms optimized for engagement, not harmony. Content that provoked emotion traveled further than content that encouraged nuance. The village rewarded attention, not reconciliation. These dynamics were not obvious in 1999. They emerged only once the global village reached full population. What this prediction teaches us about the future. This case reveals a recurring blind spot in optimistic forecasting, confusing connection with cohesion. Technology can bring people into proximity, but it cannot guarantee mutual understanding. Social outcomes depend on institutions, incentives, and norms, not just bandwidth. In 1999, it felt reasonable to believe that a connected world would be a gentler one. In 2026, we know that connection is a force multiplier for cooperation and conflict. The future delivered the village. It did not deliver consensus. One sentence takeaway. The internet made the world a global village. But villages, it turns out, can argue just as fiercely as nations.